we have got a special guest who is Alexis Gonzales-Black, AGB is what I'll be referring to her, just so we're all on the same page. She actually is the person who is leading the facilitator circle within Zappos and has been instrumental in their implementation over the last just over a year. What I'd love to do is, rather than me do the introduction, I'd actually really love to pass it on over to you, AGB, to say a few words about your role, your experience, and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited to be here today. Like Anna mentioned, my name is Alexis Gonzales-Black, but I go by my initials, AGB. I've been working at Zappos for about 2.5 years now. And about a year and a half ago, in May of last year, Holacracy was rolled out at Zappos. And we had an opportunity. I was part of the pilot group of Holacracy, and instantly the sort of system resonated with my personal sort of ideas about how work should look, and jumped onto the team. And for the last year and a half have been helping lead the transition at Zappos from a traditional management structure to a self-organizing structure of Holacracy. So that's my work, and I love it. I basically get to free people from their own fears about leading their work and free them from crappy managers. And so that's the work that I love doing. And I mean that facetiously. We have incredible managers at Zappos, but doing the hard work of sort of freeing people up to do what they love and to follow their passion. And I really love my job. I'm lucky.
Beautiful. Well, welcome. Really appreciate you making the time today. And just to give you a little bit of background, WonderWorks. My name's Anna McGrath from WonderWorks Consulting, and we are a licensee. We're the only US-based license provider, along with Holacracy One, and we go ahead and implement Holacracy in businesses for all of the aforementioned reasons that AGB said, to really create that level of freedom. So today, firstly, I'll do a couple of logistics. One is, if you want to be able to see the full screen mode of the videos, because we're not going to be doing a PowerPoint today, you can either double click on the video feed and it will pop out full screen, or you can click on the little icon where there's kind of 3 little people, top right hand corner. You can single click on that and that will get you the screen as well. So what I'd like to do is really have a chance to say, what was the journey like from start to finish, from the moment Zappos started this implementation journey of bringing Holacracy into what was already an amazing culture. So my thought is, let's kick off with, you had an amazing culture. You're recognized worldwide for that culture. Why do you think it actually made sense to implement Holacracy when you already had such a good thing going?
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I came to Zappos because of the incredible culture, and is the only business that I'm familiar with that has fun and a little weirdness as an organizational priority. And that really drew me to Zappos, and it was pretty incredible. But I think the best way to describe why we decided to make the move to Holacracy was probably because Tony uses this kind of analogy that he got from the book Triumph of the City by Ed Glazier, a Harvard professor. And the story is that, or the research shows that as cities double in size, the average productivity of each resident increases by about 15%. And we know that the opposite tends to be true with companies, right? As companies double in size, productivity, innovation, efficiency all decrease for a number of reasons, right? Communication issues, bureaucracy, all kinds of challenges. And so the move to Holacracy was really an attempt to make Zappos more like a city, and get us sort of back in touch with our startup roots and making decisions and changing and evolving quickly as real world conditions change.
Okay, great. And yeah, I think there's some phenomenal things that I've heard actually Tony talk about, as he really talks about his passion about cities as well. So as you're thinking about that being a goal, it's like, how can we really get productivity and creativity to to continue to be unleashed instead of having those, decreases. How are you experiencing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the first couple months of implementing Holacracy, the first thing that you're going to notice, or the first win of Holacracy, is just surfacing all of the tensions that have existed at the company for some time, but maybe have been living in that sort of gray area or that implicit area that nobody talks about. And so what's funny about it is that in the short term, it doesn't feel like a win. It actually feels difficult. It feels like work just got more difficult because of Holacracy. But in reality, what we try to frame for people is that what we're doing is we're surfacing tensions that have existed at the company and starting the long road of addressing those issues and beginning to evolve the company. And so I think that we're still in, we call it the dip. So we're still in that dip right now of, bringing up all those tensions and surfacing all of these implicit expectations we've had for each other, and beginning the long road to sort of taking steps forward and making the company better. And we've seen a couple bright spots so far. We're now, like I said, a year into the implementation. About 80% of the company has their work captured in Holacracy. And we've begun to see these really incredible stories and case studies and bright spots pop up about people who are able to lead work in ways that they haven't before, people who get to engage in discussions and sit at very important decision-making tables that they haven't gotten a chance to before. So I'd say overall we're headed in the right direction, but we're still very much in the dip of implementation.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning the dip because, to me, there's a number of things that pop up in my mind. One is the amount of patience, because what I'm hearing with you as you're experiencing this dip and it's a year in, there's some much deeper commitment that is going on within you, within Zappos, within Tony Shea. There's this deeper level of commitment of we're heading in a direction. We know what that direction is. We know what we want. We know we want creativity. We want that aliveness. We want that energy within the organization. And a year-long dip, as I hear that, and I, imagine others hearing that, it's like, wow. So I don't know, is there anything more that you could say about that?
It has been incredibly challenging for sure. I mean, I just want to put that out there up front. I think what continues to keep us committed to the work of moving to Holacracy is as people, I think, begin to develop their own authentic stories of seeing something that worked. So it's really important that you begin making sure that people have the opportunity to have that one light bulb moment or that one sort of moment where they see, wow, like something is different now because of Holacracy. And I think if you do a good job of providing opportunities for people to have that moment and then publicizing those moments and surfacing those moments and making sure that, we're talking about the positive things that are happening, you can kind of grease the wheel and keep people really focused on the vision of where we're going. But it's hard. I mean, we have been struggling to get 100% of the work captured. We have the implementation of Holacracy that is, a priority along with meeting our business and strategic goals, right? And it can feel like a lot. But I think that, our sort of vision setters and Tony in particular, who signed the Holacracy Constitution and sort of, made this move, have been, their commitment to it has been really critical too. And their continued kind of support and vocal support of the work that we're doing. So, but it is hard for sure.
Yeah. And I think that to me, when I think about culture, so my brain kind of flicked back to culture, and the way I capture this in my mind is you've got culture here, which is critically important. And you've got what I would say is the other polarity, the other kind of opposite element, which is structure. So Holacracy being structure and culture being all the values and behaviors and all the great work that you do. In both of these, I can see such a, it's kind of that gut check moment of we're in it for the long run. This is not some quick oh, let's do this thing, let's get some, early win and some, some kind of great results from within 5 minutes. It's this long-term commitment. And the other piece I would say is, because you mentioned about the stories, like what are the individual wins? Because I know for me, that individual win of, oh my goodness, look at what Holacracy can bring, that came really early for me. But before I dive into any of mine, what was kind of the one that came early for you that went, there is something here?
Yeah, I want to say something about the first point that you made about the sort of commitment to staying in Holacracy even when it's difficult. And that is, I think that I did a pretty bad job early on, communicating about Holacracy. And what I mean by that is I held a bunch of like Holacracy 101, and I was so enamored with Holacracy because it's so closely aligned with like the way that I thought like business should be run, that I was like on fire, and I was telling people like, no more bureaucracy, no politics, like this is a new world. And everybody's like, yeah, this is going to be great. And then we got into it, and I realized that the really critical piece that I missed was I was saying Holacracy is going to get rid of these things, when what I should have been saying is Holacracy is a system that's going to allow you to get rid of these things. And that, like, I just want to highlight that, because at some point about a year into it, I realized like, oh my gosh, I've gone about this completely wrong. Because people are like, I thought you said Holacracy was going to solve all of these problems. And you're like, what I meant was you can now solve your own problems, which kind of brings into question a whole new set of things to work on, which is, the behaviors and skill sets and mindsets of people that you work with, and making sure that they've got the tools to leverage Holacracy to get the change that they want done. So I just wanted to note that, because I think culturally at Zappos, we have such a strong culture that allows us to do this kind of work. And I'm so lucky to work with people who, one of our core values is embrace and drive change. And it's kind of in our DNA, and they've really embraced it, and they've been, on board. But it is not without its missteps and without a lot of communication challenges. But I'm lucky to work with forgiving people. So the second question you asked about bright spots and stories. I think the one that comes to mind most recently that kind of blew my mind, which is it like tickles me. Oh, there you are. Can you guys see me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I was recently on a chain of emails between, it was our like CEO, it was like some other leaders, and there was this big initiative that was changing at Zappos. And there was some communication put out about it. And one of the first things that happened in Holacracy was there was a tension around internal communication and how we didn't have like really streamlined like methods of internal communication. So this guy who was passionate about it created the internal communication circle just out of nothing. He became the lead link of this circle, and then he, inherited all the authorities that were, that role afforded him of being the lead link of this new circle that he had just created out of a tension that he was experiencing, right? So he's been living in that role. And recently I was on a chain email about this new initiative, and what I saw was this incredible level of engagement. So it was like Tony and like senior leaders talking about this communication plan, and then all of a sudden Stevie, who's the lead link of this internal communication circle, jumps in. And at the top of the email, I knew it was going to be good, because he's like, see my answers below in all red caps, or like something like that. And I was like, oh my goodness, like Stevie is like he's in the fight, right? For this, for communication. And there was this like interaction about, what is the best way to communicate about these changes to the company. And he was pushing back on, and, like months ago, I don't know that he would have been in the position to just jump in on this conversation, but now he had clarity of role, and there was a tension, and he was leading this work. And I think those moments for me are the best moments, to see folks who are doing the work actually be in the discussions about that work, rather than being like sort of excluded from that, maybe because they aren't senior enough or they haven't been at the company long enough. So I think those are like really beautiful moments where you see work getting done and you see the right people in the room, and it really, I have a few of those stories, but that's one of the most recent.
Yeah, I love that one. There's just something to me like all the theory of holacracy, which I know that for some people it actually can be a really big turnoff, because it's just so theoretical. And holacracy isn't theoretical at all. It's so much about practices. It's so much about processes, and that story, it underlines, I think, one of the most critical elements about fulfillment, which is, if I'm doing the work, am I actually in the conversation? Am I actually making the decisions? Do I actually have real power? Because if I don't have real power to make decisions, how do I learn? How do I grow? I've got to have power, because then I can make really bad decisions and I can scan back, oh, look at those ones. But now I've got so much more of a wealth of knowledge. So I really appreciate that story. It really highlights the power of anyone can truly step up to the CEO in all red caps, and say, or the old CEO, should we say? Yeah. So the thing you mentioned at the very beginning, you talked, or you mentioned actually just a moment ago, and you really were talking about this issue of holacracy does not solve the problems, but holacracy creates a system where the individual can step up and take responsibility and resolve issues, or can take the next action or the next project and really affect real change in the organization. So as you think about that particular skill, the skill of each individual being able to step up to sense attention for those that are really new to holacracy is the gap between current reality and a future potential, which sounds great. Like, what does that mean? It literally is anything that pops up where you go, that's not working, or we could be doing it this way. So to me, what is your thought about kind of the ability for each person? Zappos is the biggest implementation so far, and you've got X number, I know it's 1,500, I'm not sure what the exact count is at the moment, but each person to sense and then process tensions. Tell me a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, so this is the journey that we're on right now, because like I mentioned, it sounds like an empowering tool and everybody's so excited about it. But when you actually have people show up in meetings, what you realize is that people have had that ability to sense and process tensions openly and freely kind of like beat out of them over the course of their professional career. And it's not a skill that comes naturally to people, particularly the longer that you've been in the working world, the less naturally it comes to you. I think people who maybe have been under layers of management really struggle with like feeling the tension, sensing the tension, and then translating that into something, and then owning that and showing up, and without fear of, engaging in difficult conversations or transparent conversations. So I think like tension sensing is an incredibly powerful tool, but I think it's important to recognize how much work has to go into building that muscle. And so we've actually created like a flow chart of like step one, you sense attention, right? And what might attention feel like? You might feel irritated at somebody. You might feel, right? I mean, it seems so simple, right?
No,
but it's not. It's incredibly difficult, right? To recognize when you might be experiencing a tension, build context about that tension and come up with a proposal that you think is going to move you forward. So I think that journey is the journey that we're on. And once people get the hang of it, and they get positive reinforcement from processing tensions, it gets much easier, but providing that experience for 1,500 people is really difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you raise a few things there, because the issue to me, or the piece I would underline is, and then they get the positive reinforcement for sensing and processing attention, which is a total mind flip. Because people have not been positively rewarded for bringing up, for kind of bringing out the dirty laundry, or raising the issues about the elephant in the room, or all of these different issues. People have got a whole life experience of, don't do that. I didn't see that. I haven't got that tension. And even the word tension. What I find fascinating is when you say that word tension, there is so much negative charge with the word. And so use whatever word you want, but to really kind of to rework the meaning of tension, the gap, it's literally a gap. So it could be a positive thing, it could be perceived negative, it could be whatever, but it's the gap. And how are we able to be with that gap and then take action, take responsibility for the next thing?
So one thing that's coming to mind is I read this research recently on hand washing in hospitals. And so there was a time when hand washing was not a common practice in hospitals and infection was rampant. Have you heard this research before? I feel like, yeah. So I think what I took from reading this was they tried all of these programs to get people to wash their hands, and then they tried to get other people to hold other folks accountable for washing their hands. So they would say, if you see somebody that didn't wash their hands, tell them, wash your hands, right? But in a hospital, janitors were being expected to check doctors to wash their hand, and there was a power dynamic there that was not, they were scared to engage in that discussion, right? And so what they found is they couldn't just encourage people to wash their hands. That didn't lead to behavior change. They couldn't just tell people to hold each other accountable for washing their hands. That didn't lead to any real change. The critical lever came when they told people to say thank you for reminding me to wash my hands, right? So when a janitor said, hey, wash your hands, and the doctor said, thank you for reminding me, that was the critical lever that turned that created real behavior change. And so what it makes me think about is how do we express gratitude and thanks for people who are willing to process tensions? Because it's not enough to say you're free to process tensions, go nuts, right? Or push other people to process tensions. But it's a third step of really valuing that in the culture of our company and as a part of our dialogue every day, thanking people for bringing that up and really positively reinforcing that. So I think that's important.
Yeah, it's funny, as you're saying, you've said a few things. One was about sensing the tension and how do you train someone to sense a tension? And then this other thing about appreciation or gratitude or, really being able to express that. And these are two such distinct skills. How do I learn to sense and how do I learn to appreciate? Because we don't just come, out of the factory, as you like. We don't just get born with those abilities. Or actually, I could argue the other way. We actually get born with those abilities, but they do get beaten out of us quite often in the institutions that we participate in. And I think this is one of the reasons why Holacracy was just such a no-brainer for me. It was I'd kind of do this where I had studied with the Hendricks Institute for the Leadership and Transformation program, and it was a 2-year program, deep dive, where you were really looking at all aspects of self-leadership. How do you lead yourself? How do you follow others? How do you lead your role? How do you follow others' roles? Is how I would translate it now. And I think that skill of sensing it takes years, and it takes that reinforcement, that skill of appreciation. How do we actually learn that skill? And so when you talked about the sensing skill, some of the things you're doing, what have you done around appreciation? Or do you feel like that was already baked into your culture because you were highly appreciative already?
So I think that we are an incredibly appreciative company. And I think that we have fostered that sort of team and family spirit, and we support each other and we love each other. And that's one of the best things about Zappos. I think that it still takes kind of learning a new behavior, because what you're thanking people for has to be really explicit. And I guess when you learn how to be appreciative and demonstrate gratitude, right? You don't often learn how to demonstrate gratitude for difficult things, right? That's we thank people for bringing us McDonald's in the morning. We thank people for, getting us a coffee at the Zappos Cafe. These are all things that we express gratitude for, but it takes a lot of introspection to really give and feel gratitude for things that are difficult, that just made that just surfaced something that was challenging, to be thankful for those moments and the opportunity to get better. And so I think a part of it is baked into our DNA. We've always said feedback is a gift, right? We learned that at Zappos, we all do new hire training. We all get on the phones and we answer the 1-800-Zappos line, and they tell you over and over again, if you get a customer that's having a negative experience, like, feedback is a gift, right? And anything that you get is a gift. So I think we are trained and onboarded in that way, but it's just reinforcing that, recognizing that sometimes there is clarity in muddling through difficulty, right? And that we have to be appreciative of that journey. And I think that is not as traditional and a little bit more of a stretch for us.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of more of that deep dive journey for each individual, not necessarily the central focus of the organization. However, I don't have life split into these kind of separate places of work and personal and, all these different boxes. It really is about the journey of the individual to say, how do you build these skills of gratitude over time? And the thought that pops in my mind, it's really in the last 3 days that I had a pretty big experience myself, was many years ago, I'd heard Van Jones, who's a lawyer in Oakland, and he does amazing work. And I remember he was talking about social justice, and it was through the Pachamama Alliance, and they focus on environmental sustainability, social justice, and either personal or spiritual fulfillment. And so in the social justice realm, the issue is, we were talking about equality, and he was saying that really it's about, is every straw, like if you could pull a straw, which life you're going to get, is every straw viable? Do you have your basics covered? Is there ability to get educated and have food and clean water? And are those basics in place? So he was using the straw analogy. And so he was saying that if you pull a straw, would any one of the straws that you'd feel confident that, oh, you know what, life's going to be okay. I might not be the multimillionaire, but I'm going to be okay. My life's going to be good. And it was only literally in the last couple of days, I realized how amazing the straw I pulled was. No matter what struggles or whatever in the early stages. So I think that really deep appreciation, it comes in, kind of appreciation. I can't appreciate someone for bringing me McDonald's. It's just against my political views, but that's okay. But, really appreciating somebody bring me my bottle of water full. It's the small appreciations and it's the deep appreciations to say, wow, aren't we lucky to have the privilege to be talking about holacracy, fabulous cultures, and not do we actually have clean drinking water? So I think that there's in work, there's the skill of appreciation, and there's kind of the skill of appreciation in life itself.
Yeah, and I think one thing that is really salient about that to me is that we are in this really big discussion now about entitlement at Zappos. And so you see all of these, Zappos is a .com company, you see all these companies like Google and Facebook, and everybody knows about Google, and like the food and the amenities and all of the benefits that go on. And Zappos has a similar kind of culture where we have incredible benefits. We have happy hours and free food and drinks. And I mean, it just like the cup overflows with the amount of cool stuff that we have at Zappos. And we've gotten into this really intense discussion about entitlement in the workplace, right? Because now these things are seen as commonplace. Like they're part of what we show up every day. And we actually have like a series of parody videos called Zappos Work Problems, kind of like first world problems, if you've heard that saying before, right? And so it's like somebody showing up and being like, oh, I only got 2 drink tickets for the happy hour. Like, what will I do? Or like, oh, they don't have my favorite they don't have Diet Dr. Pepper in like the vending machine today. Like, oh, nobody loves me. It's like, it's really a robust discussion that we're having now about what does it mean to be entitled and to be thankful. And in a way, it's a discussion that we have to really balance, because if we get too much into the stop being entitled, then you get into a place where you're telling people to just shut up and like be happy for what they have, right? Which is not what you want to encourage. You want to encourage like productive skeptical criticism and tension surfacing, right? But at the same time, balancing that with having an appreciation, a deep appreciation of the basic needs that we have met at Zappos. So trying to find the right balance between like encouraging people to process tensions and also appreciate the things that we have, that is an incredibly difficult dance. And it's hard to convey with people about what it looks like to strike the right balance between those two things.
Yeah, as you say that, I think about the work of Barry Johnson, and he's done phenomenal work over the last few decades about leveraging polarities. And so a polarity being two interdependent pairs that are actually look opposite, but they're positively stated. So they're neutral or positive. So as I'm hearing you speak, I think about taking care of self is positive, taking care of others is positive. And now how do we leverage these two poles of taking care of self, taking care of others? Or, maybe, when we think about candor, you're talking about tensions. How do we leverage candor, which is being authentic, speaking honestly, delivering feedback, whatever that might be. But also, how do we leverage the word diplomacy? I don't really particularly like. It could be indirect communication, because do we really want to deliver 10 pieces of feedback all at once and whomp the person? Or do we want to land it in a way that they can hear the most critical piece of feedback so they can do something with it? So to me, the polarity work is embedded, I think, within holacracy. And there's a number of different polarities that I see show up. And it's like leveraging speaking and leveraging listening. The meeting processes really give that both of those polarities sacred space for one person to speak, one at a time, no crosstalk, no discussion. Those things really leverage some of these polarities. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a while ago we had a conversation about polarities, and we've introduced that concept in some of our training at Zappos. We talked specifically about how in the early days of Zappos, it can seem like you're abandoning team. It seems like a very individual practice of selfishly processing tensions that you're feeling, right? And I think that can feel very isolating to people. And at Zappos, where we have such a strong team and family culture, it felt like we were moving away from our culture by telling people, you don't need to seek consensus, you don't need to, okay this or get approval. We want you to just to do you, right? And to feel your tensions. And so that elicited a lot of fears about holacracy being not in line with Zappos team culture. And so we've explored the idea of polarity as it relates to individual decision making and then group decision making, and how holacracy helps us kind of take positives from both areas, right? And you've got different rounds in holacracy that the objection round and integration round and things that are really co-creating and building together, and then places where your individual, sort of tension have sacred space as well. So we've tried to explore that a lot with the company, and I think it's helping people understand it.
Yeah, I think it's, to me, when I think about what I would call transformational leadership work, and again, that's self-leadership, lead your roles, follow others' roles. When I think about that work, which is much more behavior-driven, values-driven, I think polarity values and being able to leverage polarities is at the center of that work. And then when I think about holacracy, I think polarities is at the center of that. So I'm really excited to hear that you're doing more with polarities, because to me, it is the one thing that actually honors everyone. Because no matter, say if we're talking about continuity and innovation, when I think about the people on this call, I make up a story that I bet that we've got a lot of people who honor the pole of innovation or transformation, that are all about early adopter, new, going in that direction. But if we don't honor continuity, if we don't honor stability, how do we do these amazing things?
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna turn the question asking then to you, Anna, because this is something I'm trying to wrap my head around. Change becomes a constant in holacracy, and that constant evolution can lead to change exhaustion and a lot of fear. So tell me, please. I'm going to be taking notes. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about how Holacracy honors both change and innovation and stability for people and values that need in people.
Yeah, I love that question. So where I would say there's a number of different things that I would look at. One is when organizations are creating really great policies, really great procedures, really great not checklist items, but checklists for their job. You get these phenomenal processes that are in place where we've got stability. We know, just like, a pilot's going to go down its checklist, we at WonderWorks, and I've got to give a shout out to Ra right now, because we changed our webinar platform just in the last few days. And that meant an enormous amount of work that he had to go through to revise the checklist. We had our beautiful checklist for the other platform. Now we have a new one. Mm-hmm. And so to me, it's actually about consciousness to say, are we honoring innovation? We know we are with Holacracy. It's like, here's attention. Okay, let's iterate forward. There's a real bias towards change and action. That's right. But are we in our consciousness really calling in actually stability? I want to honor the people, because to be perfectly honest, if you actually went around, like right now in this moment, I don't know if Ra can do a poll, but I'd love it if he did a poll in the background that said, how many people would have a preference for innovation on this call, and how many would have a preference for stability or for continuity? So if that happens, brilliant. And if it doesn't, it's all great too. So we'll see if Ra's listening. But the thing that I would say is, because my innovation, so I'm an innovator and I am consciously looking at stability for myself. So I come into a Holacracy meeting and I am all about innovation. My tensions are about, how do we iterate forward? How do we, do this next big shiny thing? And then the person sitting beside me might be way into continuity. It's like, so as we're processing tensions, whether it's in open discussion, in tactical, or whether it's in reaction round, in the IDM process, in our governance meeting processes, the continuity person is going to be bringing up there, this is not safe enough to try. Mm-hmm. This is, we need stability right now. We've just done initiative A and B. This is about stability. And I know that based on presently known data, because do you know the 10 things we just talked about is we can't get it done. And so based on presently known data, the next innovation this isn't the time. So, there's going to be specifics about whether it really is safe enough to try or not. There's specifics to each example. But this is what I find the honoring happens of both poles, is the continuity people have got just the same tension processing formula as the innovation people. And it is not about right or wrong. It is about those two energies being, really owned and honored, to be able to kind of have that dynamic tension between these values so that we truly make brilliant decisions going forward. And as an example, so I laughed before I got on this call. I said to Ra, the universe sent you, Ra, to me, because I am a big innovator and I'm also pressure prompted. I do things at the last minute. And the universe sent someone to me that is even a bigger innovator and an even bigger pressure prompted person, to put that mirror up. So here's me. Okay. Oh, wow. This is what innovation and pressure prompted causes in others. Because now he's just upped the game and he's freaked me out. And you got to be way out there to freak me out.
You should invite me to be on your team, because I'm the opposite. I'm an emotional balancer. If somebody's freaking out, like the way that you and Ra were freaking out before this call, I go completely cold. I just stop. I freeze. I'm like, I'm not doing anything right now. So maybe the universe has brought me into your life and we should work on that.
Well, the funny thing is, because as I've said to Ra, I said, funny enough, I don't feel freaked out. And where he freaked, the last, like it was what was the time? 11:54. We had 6 minutes. I looked at the clock. And up until then, I mean, all sorts of things had happened, weird stuff, no sound, no video, pixelation, all the rest of it. And I was like, this is no big deal. As long as we can hear, who cares? You know, there'll be a video, people will be able to hear it. As long as they could hear, I could hear you to ask you a question and everyone could hear both of us, then it's all good. But at 11:54, when Ralph said, I tell you what, Anna, I mean, I've got the little piece of paper, end the meeting, leave the session, dial on, join the meeting, put in the meeting code and do it all again with 6 minutes to go. And I think it was actually about 4 minutes by the time we had a conversation. I know that my owner-founder role of old, you know, before Holacracy, would have said, no, I won't do it. I won't do it. We've only got 4 minutes. Integrity and agreement keeping is core to me. I will not start the webinar late. I know I would have said it. But what I knew was, this is not my role. It is Ra's role. And as much as everything inside me had a last minute, like, you know, it was like, it's his role. Press, leave the meeting, do the thing, Anna, and follow his role. And so I had a mini like, oh my goodness, we will not be speaking at 12 o'clock. But you know what? It was, I just love, Holacracy has grown me. And believe me, I have got such a practice of breathing with and you know, I mean, Kathleen Hendricks and Gay Hendricks have actually over 11 years got me to truly have a practice, a transformational practice. And every one of those skills was used today. But the thing for me about freaking out is, are we being authentic and are we allowing the role that has the decision-making authority to truly make the decision? And so that's what happened today. And I don't know, I have such a moment of appreciation for this system and structure that could actually, you know, control me in a really positive way.
I mean, I'm actually learning something now, and I'm thinking about taking it back. We've been talking about leadership, and there's something about like Holacracy makes every person a leader of their roles, and we keep talking about it, but I think one of the polarities that we have to investigate is like leadership and followership, right? And how Holacracy strengthens both in a company, that it's not just everybody's a leader, but everybody now can be an explicit follower of others. And I think it's a dirty word, you know, like, oh, I'm not a follower. But like leadership demands followership, like it has to happen, right? And if you're leading in a bunch of opposite directions, then nothing's going on with the company. So I think what you just said is I'm like literally, and I've got a notepad up right now and I'm taking notes during this call where I'm the featured guest, right? I mean, how's that for a humility check, right? About things that like I need to go back and talk about at Zappos. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I love that. And what I'm appreciating, I'll just do a little high five for you there, because we are obviously such learners, because look at me. I've got, through this call, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 8 of these all around my 2 computer screens, because they're such phenomenal things. You know, I'm loving it. You know, explicit entitlement, and you know, I mean, all of the things we're talking about. I look at them in another polarity. I look at ancient wisdom and cutting edge. You know, this is actually also because both of those can be under the innovation pole. But the ancient wisdom, because let's face it, we know about gratitude and appreciation and about authenticity and candor and entitlement. We know about and storytelling and small wins leading to big wins. And, you know, we know about all this stuff. It's ancient wisdom. But how are we employing cutting edge ways to actually make us actually be able to walk the talk, because that's the thing. And that's what I really love and honor about love, just noticed it over my head, and honor Zappos, because you walk the talk. And it isn't skipping down the road in some kumbaya moment. It's actually gut-wrenching stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what I really see with the people who implement holacracy, and truly they're willing to walk the talk, because it doesn't happen overnight, it happens over years. But I think that's the bit to me, that's why I call holacracy the Harry Potter sorting hat, because what it does is it sorts out the existing power holders, CEOs, executive directors, partnerships, or co-op partners. It sorts out those, or government agencies for that matter. It sorts out the ones that have tried everything and they still see that there is a way to up level. There's a way to actually do it even more effectively. Culture will get you halfway there. Structure's the other component. So I do kind of have a tip of the hat to say, holacracy, Harry Potter sorting hat, the most coolest people are on this call, I know, because it pulls them in.
Yeah.
Ladies, this is Raw. I wanted to jump in for a second because we have some questions that I'd like to get to.
Great.
So I'm going to bring James Ware on the line. James, I'm going to open up your line. Go ahead and come on and ask your question of either Anna or Alexis.
Great.
Okay, thanks very much, Ron. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Hi, Jim.
Okay, hi. This cycles back a little bit, but I think it relates to what you've just been talking about as well. When Alexis was talking about people feeling gratitude and learning to express gratitude, it struck me that a traditional leader who is feeling or being pressured to empower his or her staff and then get some pushback, it's hard for me to imagine them feeling gratitude. I think they'd feel more threatened. And I just wondered if you could address that, because I think this power differential that you were talking about at the very beginning is so central to the quality of conversations that we have, whether it's about tensions or polarities or just work tasks. Getting people to start really, those who have power, to start acknowledging and living with others having power. I'm sorry, it's a very complicated question. I'm wandering around here, but I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah. Do you want to take that, AGB, and then I'll chime in afterwards?
Yeah. So, I think when we first introduced holacracy, we knew that there would be some pushback from our sort of legacy leaders, because it would feel like the rug was being pulled out from under them and everything that they had worked for. And I tried to put myself in their shoes, because I tend to be like the people's champion. That's just my, where I come from. And I'm like, the revolution, and I'm all about it. And the first piece of feedback that I got from Tony Hsieh was, you need to empathize with folks who are not in that position and understand. And so I tried to put myself in the shoes of somebody who had been at Zappos for 10, 15 years, had worked their way up to a position where they had, some degree of power and a team. And to have that challenged by this distributed authority model. So I think it's something that we've thought about a lot. And the way that we talk about it is that holacracy is not, we have to give our legacy leaders an opportunity to find their new roles in holacracy. So rather than taking away power from them and saying, now we've taken your power, we have to give them the opportunity to define new ways to have, exert power and influence and feel like they are the masters of their own destiny, and that they can contribute and add value to their teams, which is still very much a need. So the need for great people management and great project management doesn't go away. It's just about defining that in holacracy and making sure that we honor that and bring that work over really explicitly, so that they can find a new role and a new place from which to act in holacracy. And so that is an exercise that we're constantly sort of engaged in. And yeah, I mean, the best managers out there have always felt, even prior to Holacracy, the best managers have always felt gratitude when being pushed back on by their team, right? Like, I mean, all of us can think of the best manager we've had, and it's a person that's incredibly open to feedback and growing and learning. So we have already great managers that have that in them, and it's about just preparing other folks who want to take on people management with the same skills. So it's definitely difficult, but I think helping people find their new role in Holacracy has been a bridge for us.
Yeah. Anna, I'm going to jump in real quick. And while you give a brief answer to that, AGB, if you could take a look at the Q&A panel, and as we're running towards the end of the webinar here, if you could maybe pick the top 2 questions there you'd like to address before we finish up the webinar.
Okay, great. And just to, for what I would think about that, and I said Jim because I actually know Jim. And so I know it says James, so Jim James. What does, I look at, for the leader, the legacy leader that is actually distributing power, part of their power is actually no longer embedded in their roles, because by definition, for others to have decision-making power, it has to come from somewhere. But what I also look at is, what does this now give to you? Because it gives you a whole other bunch of freedom. You're no longer the bottleneck. You can dive into roles that are actually centrally your genius. So it gives you a whole bunch of things. And when I think about, I don't necessarily see it through the lens of people management. I see it through the lens of really, it's like a hierarchy of roles. And yes, I might have a role that's coaching, but I'm coaching in that respect, so I kind of break it out rather than I'm managing these people. But just to, kind of sound off on that one. But so what are the couple of questions that resonate with you, AGB?
So I think the first question that we should answer is from Martin Roll, and it says, "I think I am lost in time zones. Am I early or am I late?" And I did that one.
I did that one earlier already.
No. I'm just kidding. I don't actually. I just want to point out that as an adult, I still don't understand time zones either. So I'm with you, Martin. I don't get it. That was question number 1 that I felt like had to be addressed. Okay, so. I guess the next one that pops up is the Holacracy installation path at Zappos being rolled out from the top down, circle by circle? How many circles are fully running now? So yeah, there was kind of like an initial tension here, because in an attempt to kind of step away from the rigid management hierarchy that we had and move into Holacracy, we had to make the decision about how do we roll it out. And it seemed like the easiest way to roll it out was from the top down. But the fear is that you just reinforce the notions of like power over power over power if you roll it out that way. So ultimately what we did was we started with a pilot group of our HR group, about 70 people. And then once we'd been running that for about 3 or 4 months, decided to roll it out with the rest of the company. And we did decide to roll it out from the top down. So we, from what we call our internal board, which is our broadest circle that encompasses the entire company, decided to roll out the next circle. So our largest merchandising and finance and technology circles. And from there on out, we rolled into all of the functional areas. And as of right now, we've got about 240 circles that are operating. And we anticipate that ultimately we'll have between 300 and 400 circles by the time it's all said and done and everybody's been organized by the end of the year. And that process it's been really difficult to roll out. As far as the timeline and wanting to not make it mandatory. We want people to want to move their work into Holacracy. So creating incentives and opportunities for engagement for people to move into Holacracy rather than like a strict timeline where we say like, you're rolling out now and like put all your work in Holacracy. So that has been, finding that balance has been difficult, but I think at this point we're on track to hit our goal of 100% of the work captured by the end of the year. And we feel really good about it.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, any other? I noticed there's one that says, what does process and attention really look like? So just to kind of repeat up the point with Ra as a 30-second demonstration. So process and attention was, Ra, we've only got 5 minutes. I can't remember what exactly said. So that was me processing my tension. Like, I want to start on time is what I think I said out my mouth. And he said in a very clear, authoritative voice, something like, we need to do this. And so that was a very clear example. I processed my tension and I heard from the role holder, we need to do this. And so then I went ahead and followed that role. So that to me was a very quick processing attention. So it doesn't look like some weird and wonderful thing. It's just literally saying whatever out the mouth and then saying, what do I need to do to resolve my tension? So Ra said, I need you to get off this and call back in. He didn't say it in that way, but bottom line. So it's what do you, the tension holder, need to do to resolve your tension? For me, it was speaking out my mouth. For Ra, it was saying, go ahead and do it. So over to you. Any others?
One question that popped out was, how do you involve culture in holacracy, which has been a struggle trying to find the marriage between culture. And I guess you have to think about holacracy as an operating system. So it's kind of like you just upgraded your iPhone to iOS 8. It's an operating system, and it's not much fun. If your phone only had iOS 8, you wouldn't spend 100 hours on it every day, right? It's the apps that matter. And so what we've tried to do is build on the structure some apps that help us to have a little bit more fun and engagement with holacracy, but still operating within the rules of holacracy. And so we have, like games that we play during meetings where everybody has like candy, and if you crosstalk, then like you throw your candy at somebody, or we have like playing cards, or if you like talk out of turn, you have to stand up for the rest of the meeting, and just trying to like put a little bit of our personality and our culture into the process while still adhering to the rules. And I think it's all about the way that you talk about it too, and making sure that you honor the culture that brought us to where we are today. I mean, Zappos is where we are because of our focus, our kind of obsessive focus on culture. And when you find tension points where it seems like the structure of holacracy is running up against the culture and kind of who we are, not just dismissing that, but really diving into those conversations and trying to surface where is that tension and what are we willing to stand by and how can we navigate this. And so we found ourselves in a lot of those predicaments over the past couple months, and I think have successfully navigated and found a way that holacracy can fit in our culture. But I think it's a willingness to engage those challenging conversations, because you have to honor the culture. Culture is who we are, and it's what's brought us here. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a question also about how does Zappos WonderWorks deal with meta-operational, personal, and interpersonal behavior and values? I would say in the 30-second answer, we use polarity values. WonderWorks really believes in polarity values, not straight line values. So continuity and transformation, continuity and innovation, whatever labels you want. Mm-hmm. We also look at skill development. We believe that each individual role holder is to develop their own skills. And we also really believe that it is about the organization creating ways to develop skills as well. And it's not sometimes it's push, like orientation is pushed on a new hire training is pushed, but then there becomes a lot more pull training. How do I process attention? Help me pull that training so I can really develop that skill. So to me, there's lots of questions. I'm totally happy to answer those after. We've got to the top of the hour, 1 o'clock, and I know we could do about 3 more hours of this, is my imagining. I really appreciate your time, AGB, and everyone that's on the call. I'd love to do maybe a little bit more because there's so much, another time. But I'll give you I'd love to give you the opportunity just to also sign off and say goodbye as well.
Yeah.
Hey guys.
Go ahead, Rob.
Real quick, I'm going to leave the webinar open for a couple minutes after we finish here. And I just wanted to do that poll, Anna, that you wanted to do, so everybody could actually do that. Option A is consistency and continuity, and then option B is innovation and
transformation.
Got it. Okay, cool. Right. So everybody who's on the call still, take a look at that poll, and I'll leave the webinar open for a couple minutes, and you can answer that poll.
Great. I will have to jump because I am at a conference right now and I have to run back into conference and I haven't eaten lunch and I'm starving. So I just wanted to say thank you. Like I mentioned, I've learned a lot even for my implementation here at Zappos on this call, and I would love to continue this conversation. Thanks to everyone who joined us out there in internet land. And Anna, thank you for the question and the great conversation. It's always awesome to talk to you.
Brilliant. Thanks for skipping your lunch. Thank you all. Have a brilliant one. Take care. Bye.